All right, so Charles, let's hear it.
My Peterson?
Yes.
Oh, it's not. Like I said, I didn't really work on it. I don't think of it in terms of doing whole sentences. I only like doing Peterson in the context of his disingenuous interviews, where I'm thinking mostly of the one with J. Caspian Kang, where he's like, so you're saying that men and women can't work together? Maybe. Perhaps. I don't know.
I didn't say that.
I don't know. I didn't say that. There's not been a lot of time where men and women have been, but it's not a very good impression.
That's actually pretty good.
Like the degradation of the academy and the modern man in the workplace is a recent phenomenon, exposed most recently in Frozen.
But I just like that. I mean, he gives long, articulate, sort of meandering answers, right? Which are not always fully terrible. I think other people have said this, but the stuff that's that he says two things. Things that are either obvious or false. And so what's true you knew already, and the rest of it is just made up. Yeah. And so like he's like, the reason women wear makeup is to look, they wear lipstick to look like a vagina, and then it's like, it's a little much. It's a little too precise.
It's to simulate sexual arousal.
And I mean, it's really very, very funny. And it's all about, like, he ends up sounding like an imam, and he doesn't get it. Like he is just sort of all of it ends up being this real sort of very, it's like the thing he hates the most, and it's what it ends up reducing down to is that all of these women have to sort of behave differently and accede to men's natural superiority, because as soon as Bugs Bunny walks by in a dress, they go all awooga and are completely non-functional.
So what you're saying is, in addition to his other crimes, he's culturally appropriating Islam.
He is. Yeah. He is.
And Bugs Bunny.
And Bugs Bunny. Looney Tunes is going to want a word. Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 17 of Mike Dicta, America's best named legal podcast. I'm your host, Charles Starr. With me today, I've got everybody's coming back, pretty much how it's going to be from now on. Everyone say hello to Tarik.
Hello.
Oh, you didn't do it.
I'm sorry. I'm Rich Lather.
There you go. Thank you. Oh, God, you almost... Oh, man, it's been too long, my friend.
The hell dude died. Rich Lather is here.
The king is dead. Long live the king. All right. Everyone, Adam is back.
Hey, folks.
And coming back, long time no here. Hey, how's it going, Mike?
Good. Glad to be back.
Glad to have you. So we've got Supreme Court term just ended, of course, with a bang, which is sort of a huge explosion in the face of all decent people. So we've got a bunch of cases from the end of the term, and of course Kennedy retired. So we'll end up inevitably talking about him. But we're going to start with a case we talked about before, which is Janus versus AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We talked about it before. We predicted that exactly this would happen. 5-4 decision holding agency fees for public sector unions invalid as a violation of the First Amendment, which, Tarik, you want to take the first word here since this was your bailiwick for a while?
Well, I've got a lot of feels about this in general, as you know. But the thing I'm really struggling with is you only have two options for Alito here, right? I mean, he's either bought and paid for, or he's the biggest nerd on the planet. I mean, this guy took aim at this completely innocuous, wholly baked in case in Abood, around which labor structures have been built and resting comfortably. In fact, even deteriorating, on a slow basis under these rules for 4 decades, right? And this guy gets here and decides that he's got to take this thing down. And to his credit, over about, I don't know what the length of time was.
6 years.
6 years or so. He did it. I mean, this wasn't some innocuous outlier in the law that was sitting there causing problems. I mean, this was literally a foundational bedrock principle of labor law. And now it's gone. And I find it incredible, both that this guy was on this mission and that he succeeded.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, just to back up a little and explain again what agency fees are for non-Mike Dicta completists who don't want to go back and hear our first discussion of Janus. Originally, basically, a lot of public sector unions are agency shops, which is the state agrees to bargain exclusively with one union. And so we have an exclusive bargaining agent for all people in the world. And they would charge them dues. They would charge them union dues. And in Abood, a guy complained and he said, this is ridiculous. My union dues are not going to my bargaining agent. My union dues are going to my union, like going out and doing all this political stuff, endorsing candidates I hate and like endorsing non-union activity that I don't like. And so I'm paying for all of this political activity. And so I don't think that I should have to pay these dues. And what Abood said was like, that's partly right. You're paying these dues and the union does all sorts of stuff. And I don't even, like me, Charles, I don't even agree with this distinction. I think like it's more analogous kind of to taxes where like they just spend your money. However, people voted in the union and that you're just stuck with that. But they read in this First Amendment right because public sector employees are different than private sector employees. And so you can't coerce their speech on this political stuff. So we will split it up. We will say the fee, the part of the union dues that are chargeable to collective bargaining and grievance processing and other benefits that the union specifically provides, you can still charge everybody for because they're getting the benefit of it. But you have to calculate how much of your expenses go to non-chargeable things like political activity or whatever else you want to stick in the non-chargeable category. And so since Abood, they have had to provide a distinction between chargeable and non-chargeable activities. Presumably the state is who audits them.
Correct.
And then it's just sort of split up and it's fine. And then, you flash forward to a couple of years ago in Friedrichs, and then here in Janus, the guy's like, well, they're saying that 80% of what they do is chargeable activity. So he argues that not only do I oppose the political stuff, but I also oppose collective bargaining itself as political activity. I think that all of this is political activity because Illinois is in a financial crisis, and if my union gets me benefits that are too good, it only worsens the crisis. Therefore, I oppose paying any agency fee at all.
Well, I mean, isn't it the case that there's sort of an argument that negotiating with the government as employer is basically lobbying the government anyway?
Yeah, that's what they said. They said they effectively said that collective bargaining in a public sector context is like lobbying.
Yeah, because you're trying to get something out of the government just like everybody else. So there's no different.
It's just such a. I mean, and that of course flies in the face of all of the precedent that says that when the government is acting as an employer as opposed to acting as a sovereign, those are distinct things, and they should be treated distinct.
The union, and I was saying this on Twitter before, none of this has changed the responsibility on the union, which is to be the exclusive bargaining representative of all the employees in the bargaining unit, whether they pay dues or not. And it's not, it's just true that those sorts of things cost money. Putting together a bargaining committee, bargaining, grievances, challenging grievances, lawyers, arbitration fees, et cetera. It's an expensive proposition to do that kind of representational work. So there's no argument that there is a charge associated. And the union does have a duty, which Janus can turn around tomorrow and get fired from his job. And the union could refuse to represent him, and he would have a perfectly valid suit for money damages against the union for failing in its duty to represent him, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes people think that it just means like, look, you're going to do the collective bargaining for everyone anyway, so it doesn't matter either way, even though you have less money to do it. But they have to represent him in grievance proceedings. Mm-hmm. They have to manage his pension account, right? Like, all of these, his health benefits or whatever, all of those things, like it's a big free rider issue.
Yeah, and Alito even acknowledges this in his opinion. So as Charles said, this is what unions have been calling a free rider problem. And Alito says, that's right. This may require some restructuring of how unions function, but on the other hand, they've been free riding themselves on 40 plus years of a violation of the First Amendment. Yes. So who's to say which is the greater wrong?
Well, he went and did it, right? He said, it's less of a free rider problem and more of a I'm being shanghaied on a ride I don't want to be on. Right.
Yeah, he said maybe he's really just a hostage, effectively. It's really crazy. I mean, there's a lot. I think the fact that he claims that the union's behavior in bargaining does not appreciate the current fiscal crisis in Illinois. That's a quote from the opinion. I think to me that's just proof that he's a fraud entirely. And that he only took a government job in order to take down a booth.
No, he's a plant. No, he is literally the Manchurian candidate for labor. I swear to God.
He's been going after Abood for years.
Yeah.
Right. There was before this, there had been this case had come up to the Supreme Court and would have been decided this way if Scalia had not been smothered to death by an assassin. But before that, there was Harris v. Quinn, which was the home healthcare union case where Alito, somewhat unrelatedly to the holding in Harris, had basically invited a challenge to Abood.
Yeah. I think I've seen Tarik or other people online call those the camel's nose under the tent, and
That's right.
In the dissent, I think it's Kagan that gets into how they left themselves a neat little trail of breadcrumbs in Dicta or otherwise that they can pick up here when the court is ready to go. And they were, as Adam was pointing out, they were ready to go when that 4-4 decision came out because of Scalia's death as well. So this has been a long running attack on Abood, and they had to completely mischaracterize Abood to get over the hump in a lot of ways. For me, one of the big ones was that one of the keys to Abood was that having to serve all of the members was what made the nature of the collective bargaining beneficial to everyone. And as we were just talking about, they kind of erased that when they said that it's not a free rider, it's somebody that's being shanghaied. I think that the union doesn't have a way to punish free riders at all. So they
I mean, they sort of pretend that they do, right? Alito pretends that they do. He says it in a couple of places. In one place, he says that none of the amicus briefs or the dissent has explained why the duty of fair representation causes public sector unions to incur greater expenses than they would otherwise bear in negotiating agreements. And maybe they don't, but that's not the only thing that they have a DFR on, right? There are all sorts of the grievance process ends up becoming more expensive and uncompensated. And he's like, oh, well, you could just put in the collective bargaining agreement that non-members have to pay for that, but the state has to agree to that, right? Like now the state has to agree to all of these alternate financing arrangements. And that's going to vary from state to state. I mean, the governor of Illinois has already said he just doesn't want agency fees entirely. They were originally a plaintiff trying to knock them out until they lost on standing issues. So Illinois certainly isn't going to help the union recoup those fees in any way because they want to break the union.
Absolutely.
Like the governor of Illinois is essentially openly saying, I want to kill these agency fees to break the union. And that literally just sort of gets completely elided by how Alito messes this up. He slips in a part where he's like granting the raise that they want could have an impact on the budget of the government unit in question, as if like that's anything the union's supposed to care about. It's an employment negotiation. They're acting as an employer, and the sort of larger budgetary concerns might affect their bargaining position, but that's it.
No, I mean, it distilled to its essence, though, that argument is the union might be successful in raising wages and benefits for this unit, right? And what we need to do is make sure that the government as employer has the power to keep these as low as possible. The union might succeed,
which very much was Kennedy. One of the things Kennedy asked was, Kennedy thought he was like a real sort of logic gotcha guy. And he's like, so do you admit that if the union loses these agency fees, things will be harder for the union? And the attorney's like, yeah. And he's like, so then doesn't that mean you lose? And he's like, no, of course not. Yeah. That's not the point of this. Like, you can't just sort of say that it's bad for us, therefore our wanting it is a First Amendment violation. I mean, it's like one of the again, Alito sort of reflects this too. He's like, the dissent would accept without any serious independent evaluation that the absence of agency fees would cripple the public sector unions, which is basically just like, Drago in Rocky IV, right? If he dies, he dies. Yeah. Like, who cares? Like, it's just complete pretense. He knows exactly what he's doing, but because federal public sector unions don't have agency fees, but also can't bargain for wages, and like the 28 right to work states or whatever don't have agency fees. He's like, well, that's the answer, right? Since the other 28 states with diminishing enrollment and less impact than ever haven't completely died, then I'm comfortable making this decision, even though I suspect they will probably be weakened substantially.
The comparison to the federal unions ticked me off a little bit, and I think the dissent does a good job of unpacking why it's disingenuous. But they're different enough in type, and they have different types of levers. When it's a federal union, you're working nationwide. It's a different scope and a different lever that you have. It's a force multiplier essentially. With these state unions, you should allow local control to drive. Being the exclusive agent here, and with the exclusive agent, with some of these arguments, Alito kind of goes, "Oh wow, did you know that exclusive agency makes bargaining power more powerful for unions? So if we take away something like agency fees, they'll still have the exclusive right to bargain, so they'll be okay." And none of that ties together or makes sense when you look at how a union actually operates, not how it's looked at as a bad faith bogeyman.
No, I mean the federal union thing. I never touched federal unions when I did this because they're so different, right? I mean, among other things, as far as I understand, federal union can't charge agency fees, but they're not also bargaining for wages and benefits, right? I mean, in most cases, those are set by civil service and other statutes.
They also have lower expenses too.
Exactly. I mean, because it's just a completely different scope of representation.
And then he gets into all of the reasons why stare decisis wouldn't apply, and he falls back really hard on the fact that the difference between chargeable and non-chargeable expenses is difficult. and like one of the things he shows is like a one-page summary. You know, it's like it's not even. It takes up like a third of a page, which shows what the chargeable expenses are to Janus. And he's like, you see, they don't even really explain anything. How do you even challenge this? Right. And the answer is the state audited it.
Yeah.
It's not up to Janus himself to make the decision unless you think the state is acting in horribly bad faith and trying to like really stick it to the workers here. Someone is auditing the union's books and trying to split up the chargeable and non-chargeable expenses. He just like waves it away. He's like, I don't want to do it, so it's hard, and so who cares? You know, and he blames unions for like the pension crisis as if it wasn't the result of decades of underfunding budgetary decisions by the state. You know, he's like, oh, the expense is ballooning. Yeah, of course it's ballooning. You haven't contributed in 4 years. You know, and so it's like all of these things that just shouldn't have any kind of constitutional dimension.
And I was a little taken aback by I guess this is kind of attributable to how eager Alito was to overturn Abood, but at how sort of open the threads are regarding all sorts of, in some cases, kind of preposterous arguments. Like you can take this to an absurd degree. There's, it seems obvious that that a court would not actually allow a taxpayer to say, no, I'm not paying for this war. But there's nothing in Janus to indicate that, right?
Right. They would just fall back on the fact that the courts say no taxpayer standing, right? Mm. They've already written out taxpayer standing, but this, which sounds a lot like taxpayer standing, is really absolutely binding. This is a very compelling First Amendment argument.
Though one silver lining, I think, is
God. Oh my God. Holy fucking shit.
Did you just have a mouse?
No, my mic isn't plugged in. Like my mic is literally not plugged in. I put a new pop guard on.
Oh shit! I thought you were having your Robin moment with a mouse, but you're having a Robin moment with your mic plugged in.
No, it's worse. It's worse than a Robin moment because you haven't heard me at all.
No. That episode where Robin had the mouse made her kick the cable out, and I had to edit around the fact that she just disappeared halfway through.
Yeah.
So, oh, God. Yeah, that is true, but this is from the very beginning.
with better audio because I have properly plugged in my microphone. Oh, this is so embarrassing.
Just sit with that,
know.
Charles. Just sit with it. All of us just sit here and have a moment of silence for your competence.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know about you all, but I have started withholding my bar dues in anticipation of them being ruled unconstitutional.
Yep.
Look, the only reason I was paying before was to be on this podcast, as it's a requirement. So now
That's right.
I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, they very, like, the majority goes out of their way to say, no, it doesn't count for that. They don't say why. They just say it doesn't. They're just like, no, professional agency fees are fine. The stuff that the mushroom board charges mushroom sellers is fine. But this is absolutely not fine. This is terrible, and you can't do it.
Rich Lather does not argue with people on Twitter anymore. It's a guns Muslim thing. But I found myself in an argument with a moron about my bar dues, and for some reason they are dead set that I keep paying my bar dues.
That's right.
Janus or no Janus, and they were a Janus supporter. So nobody wants to stand up for my fucking rights here.
And I gotta say, when I got to the end, it made me even madder because after doing all of this to just like create and then validate and then constitutionalize this nonsense First Amendment claim, they tack on in Section 7 that it also constitutionally has to be opt-in. Right? Like, the state cannot constitutionally make the people opt out of their agency fees, right? They now absolutely have to opt into their agency fees. That is a constitutional dimension that, like, they would never apply to any other kind of, like, shrink wrap or click wrap or anything. All these things that everyone knows that nobody actually affirmatively consents to. And so they've just put another roadblock in front of the unions trying to collect this stuff. And it's just super embarrassing. My only other point is Justice Sotomayor. I don't even remember the Sorrell versus IMS Health case, but Sotomayor basically apologizes for her vote in that case. Right.
Yeah, she says it was used how she doesn't like it.
Right. She voted with the majority, and back when I guess the Kagan dissented back in Sorrell and was like, this case is stupid and everyone is going, like, the majority is clearly going to use this kind of dumb free speech argument to do things like knock out agency fees. And Sotomayor is just like, yeah, my bad. This is exactly what they did.
You were
and
right.
It's really bad that I screwed this up last time. So mea culpa.
I liked in the dissent how Kagan on the stare decisis issue hit him with a Scalia quote saying that reliance on a square, unabandoned holding of the United States Supreme Court is always justifiable reliance. That was pretty slick of her to do.
Right. And specifically because one of the things that Alito tried to do is say, look, 6 years ago, I started chipping away at Abood, and then I chipped away.
And you knew it.
And I chipped away further 4 years ago. And then in Friedrichs, you knew damn well we were going to overrule it. So any kind of reliance interest you have was illusory because you knew that I was coming for you. And Kagan's like, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
No, you're on notice. You were on notice that I'm an asshole.
Right.
Was what he was saying. Right? You were on notice that I'm a big ass motherfucking asshole who was coming for your union too.
Right. And then she says, Kagan got really chippy in this.
She did.
One of the other things she says is that, like, the majority, like, distinguishes Pickering, and Pickering was a different public sector employment case where they disciplined an individual teacher for whatever assholey thing he was doing. And he may not have been an asshole, but that's usually how these things go when they're picking on one person. Well, someone's an asshole. Maybe they were just discriminatory, but they were going after Pickering, and they distinguished Pickering, and Kagan is like, this distinction you make with Pickering is not one I think you even believe. And she goes, so I would wager a small fortune that the next time a general rule governing public employee speech comes before us, we will dust off Pickering. Right?
Well, but that's right. I mean, that's right. I mean, the as she says, and as any rational person looking at these situations would say, the government is different when the government is your boss. Your literal boss, and just acting as your like normal citizen boss, right? And that it needs to be able to tell you to show up at this time or stop saying that, because that's bad, or it needs to have some measure of control over you. And the government has historically been given some deference. And at the idea that now everything you do in the workplace could be, it's actually my First Amendment right to wear no pants. To the post office, you're exactly right. This is only going to go as far as killing unions.
Yep. Like, I think they like to do that. It's a very Bush v. Gore kind of way of approaching precedent. They're like, we promise not to expand this. And the only other thing I'll say is something that you, Tarik, said on Twitter, I think, or maybe just when we were bullshitting around, that even like Eugene Volokh, who is like a
psychotic libertarian,
hardcore libertarian, was just like, this is incredibly stupid.
Yeah, I think his amicus brief gets cited in that.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
No, Kagan because it's too perfect. I mean, even the lunatic libertarian fringe understands that at some point the government needs to be able to take money from you and do things you might not 100% agree with. With it.
Yep. And so that's it. It's a unions only rule that sometimes you can't talk. So I think that wraps up Janus. I think we have to move on to the next terrible opinion, and this is Trump versus Hawaii, which is sort of perfect, right? It was like you couldn't have a better caption than Trump versus Obama's home state. Right. He's just crowing that he won again.
Half of impact litigation, in my view, is finding the ideal named plaintiff. I started my career working the case it was called Shepard versus Phoenix. And you got to always have a snappy title. In Trump versus Hawaii, that's a banger.
Yep. And so, as everyone knows, this is about the travel ban, Muslim ban, whatever you want to call it, the executive order number 3, the proclamation, whatever it is. He took 7 countries and held them up to exacting scrutiny, extreme vetting, and the disagreement between the majority and the dissent was whether quiet part loud was justiciable. And Roberts and crew went out of their way to say, no matter how racist Donald Trump is, and we're going to downplay that a lot, no matter how racist he is, as long as his law clerks don't actually write actual racism into the proclamation, then it has to be read facially, and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's notable about the majority's opinion is that they acknowledge Trump's racism. They even in naming the executive orders, they don't use the technical numbers. They say executive order 1, 2, and 3, indicating that these are in fact the same in the series, in which the first 2 were blocked and then withdrawn. And then Roberts in the majority opinion, and Kennedy in his concurrence, throw in at various points, things about how, sometimes the president of the United States does not live up to the ideal of to bigotry, no sanction. So it's not like their heads are in the sand. They just don't care.
Yeah. Sometimes baby doesn't get his bottle and gets cranky. And so we can't listen to everything he says.
So the primary way that they do this is by how they kind of modify the standard is one way that is applied, and then how they differentiate treatment here from other cases. It's just very different, but the majority goes out of its way to say that this is a better way to go about it.
Well, but how?
I think they're wrong.
Well, my dad was a big right-wing racist, and I was working as a criminal defense lawyer, and he would get mad about how people would get off on technicalities, right? Like in the law is a bunch of technicalities, and we know the guy's guilty, and why don't we just throw. I've never seen a bigger bunch of technicalities
exactly
thrown up to excuse the fact that a person ran for office saying, I'm going to make sure these Muslims don't get in the country. Passed an executive order saying, here's your Muslim ban, and kept saying it. And these guys looked up every fucking technicality in a book that they could to forget about all of what was really going on.
They're like, number one, they're not citizens, so we don't have to really, like, the process that's due them is almost zero. The executive has this plenary authority, and they even, like, Roberts even admits that they can look behind it. Like, he throws it in. He's like, we can look behind it. He goes, well, we're not gonna. We're definitely not going to, but I kind of admit that we could. He's like, the executive order, they undertook a study. He asked his people to do this. Now, I admit that the president said, I want a Muslim ban, go make it legal. But I don't think that means much.
I don't put much stock in him running it by the cabinet when his cabinet are the racism all-stars, right. How do you expect it to end up there?
Right. I don't remember, like, right off the top of my head, I don't remember if it was Breyer's dissent or Sotomayor's, but one of them was like, yeah, he said he had a group do a study, but then just as one example, one of the guys he put on the study is, and then a page of his racist credentials.
Well, they cited to Giuliani made an appearance. I don't know if you saw that. An advisor to the campaign said, the president came to me and said, I want this Muslim ban. Show me how to do it legal.
Yeah. No, I didn't realize that was the Giuliani quote. But yeah.
No, it was. It was Giuliani.
No, but Roberts cited that. And he's like, sorry, but we're not going to. But he's like, but look, they made it legal. and so he looks at things like, he's like, oh, they say that, like, they took 90 days to issue this report where they reviewed all of the countries in the world and all of their internal security protocols, so we wouldn't get screwed by, like, the lack of information. And this is who we concluded are the bad guys. And every 180 days, we're going to revisit the list and whatever. And there's a waiver process. And Breyer's opinion, like, there are two dissents. One of the dissents is Breyer and Kagan, who decided to be kind of the moderates. And Breyer and Kagan's dissent is, look, I'm pretty sure they're lying about all of that, because nobody gets a waiver. There is an affidavit in a case currently pending in the Eastern District of New York where one of the consular officers submitted an affidavit saying, I'm not allowed to grant any waivers.
Right.
And, like, nobody is coming in on the student and other visas from these countries that are supposed to be examined on a case-by-case basis. Like, they have dropped by like an order of magnitude from what the pace would have been in 2016. So they're clearly not like taking seriously the things that they say they're taking seriously.
With one of the reasons that they say they have to institute the travel ban is because of informational deficiencies in these countries, right?
Yeah.
But now with this waiver program, how it works is that there are people from these countries that don't have these informational deficiencies because they aren't systemic. If you're a student or if you're a doctor, there are other ways that you're inputting all of this information that can get to the consulate so that you can be vetted, or sorry to use that phrasing, so you can get a waiver to get in. But now those people that would have never had any of the problems that are supposedly the backbone for this are being kept out and can't get a waiver.
The order suggests that they're going to issue procedures for these waivers, right?
Yep. That's another
thing. As many laws do, other such rules and regulations will be promulgated. They didn't do any of it, right? There's not a single pen has been put to paper on any of these structures to effectuate this thing that Roberts uses to say, well, I'm sure it's been fine.
Yeah.
For the good people.
That Breyer says that too as part of why it's disingenuous. Like Breyer and Kagan went straight process. They're like, look, if you were serious about this, then you would actually be doing any kind of review with any sort of seriousness. But since you're
or create the structures for the review, that's not even that,
right? And so they're like, you're clearly making it up. And then Sotomayor with Ginsburg, she's like, I'm not going to get into a process review. I am going to shame you because you know how stupid this is. Right, you are redoing Korematsu, the Japanese internment cases, and you have the gall to overrule Korematsu while literally redoing Korematsu.
Yeah, and the majority tried to take the sting out of that by noting that the dissents brought up Korematsu, but they tried to poison it by saying that the dissents were bringing it up for emotional reasons because it's such a charged topic here. But that was not what she was doing. It was right on the money. It wasn't an emotional reach at all. It was square.
I said this in the Slack, but Rich Lather lives for the epic clap. When Queen goes off. But in this case, there are some moments in history that are important. And I kind of think this is one of those. And you to have that opportunity where people are so lost in the bullshit, and so full of fucking shit, where you've got a raging, red-faced racist saying, I'm trying to ban all Muslims here, work with me. And these guys are bending over backwards to say that's not what's happening here. To have the opportunity to just tee off on somebody like that, I can't imagine. And she will be proven right historically. And that was the only way to go. That procedural argument from the others is fine, but she absolutely took them into their teeth, and it was a joy to read, in an otherwise joyless.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was a little upset. I understand why Sotomayor and Ginsburg wouldn't want to sign on to the sort of titchy procedural one because they kind of feel it's beside the point. But I admit I was a little disappointed that Kagan and Breyer did not sign on to the Sotomayor dissent, which was like incredibly solid. Her point was based, like, Roberts tried to duck Korematsu in two ways. He goes, number one, that was the internment of U.S. citizens, and that's why it was grotesque. And this is not that. These are people who want to come into the country, and the executive has broad authority to exclude them. But that's super embarrassing for me. And so, as a second point, let me just say that Korematsu's super bad. Super bad. Yeah. It's not good law. You can't intern citizens. And Donald Trump can keep the Muslims out as long as he doesn't write it down. He doesn't have to stop saying it. He can keep on saying it. I am not going to stop him for a second from saying it over and over again. But he just better not put it in a proclamation where I can read it. And that's the whole opinion. And it,
good job, Pucci.
It just made me so mad. Like everything about it is just fake law. It is exactly. And when you talk about like Masterpiece Cake Shop, when Kennedy got so mad at people who use religion as a masquerade for their bigotry. This is like literally using legalisms as a masquerade for bigotry.
And Sotomayor drops a Masterpiece Cake Shop. She drops multiple Masterpiece Cake Shop citations in her dissent, noting that the court earlier in the term found much less virulent expressions of animus to be dispositive.
I got the feeling that in some sense, some of the weird tonal inconsistencies out of the left on Masterpiece was sort of setting up for the zing on this in a weird way. Like that if you stand like that Masterpiece, yes, it's a problem, but we've got this whole other basically, travesty about to happen and we need to be somewhat internally consistent that these things matter.
And speaking of, I think, consistency or inconsistency and of Tarik's earlier point about sort of the eyes of history being upon the court, that was really what I was thinking about when I was reading Kennedy's concurrence, which was baffling.
Yeah. It's so bad.
So bizarre.
Kennedy has been in some cases, he's been very kind of removed from what we might consider reality. But there are other times where he's demonstrated this sort of, keen eye on, how history will view him, most notably in his gay marriage jurisprudence. And Kennedy, in his concurrence, looks at one of his gay marriage opinions, Romer v. Evans, which creates what law students are sort of told to call rational basis with teeth. That is, you look at something to see whether there's a plausible connection, but also you can't pass a law for no other reason than animus towards a certain group. And he says, I'm carving out an exception from my own jurisprudence. I'm like, yes, it's important that, we don't pass laws because of animus, but on the other hand, the president's the president. So who's to say who's right?
Yeah, I mean, he actually tries to argue that on remand, Romer v. Evans may be controlling, but it's not. But it's not really compelling. And what he ultimately does is say, "Come on, you're allowed to be racist, but please stop." And then that's it. And then he retires. I mean, that's it. He's like, and now I'm gone. And so whatever happens, happens. I wash my hands of it. I try to ask him to stop.
So it looks like his legacy is going to be on this last one is going to be, as Sotomayor said, that you're replacing Korematsu with another gravely wrong case. So at least they're being consistent.
Yep.
Well, and I would like to thank the Trump v. Hawaii court for proving my late father right. That the law is a bunch of technical bullshit designed to let absolutely clearly guilty people off the hook for the consequences of the absolutely clearly illegal bullshit that they pull.
Yeah,
it's true.
Thank you.
I have a quick question here.
Yeah.
How fast did you guys all want to scan over the Thomas complaining about nationwide injunctions?
That is what I was about to say. I'm glad you did it first, Mike.
As I've written before,
I think the idea of anybody getting a court to stop anything racist should.
Yeah, Thomas was just like this was pure, uncut, undiluted, like straight from the plant, Clarence Thomas, in which everyone is like thinking about the effects of executive power and whether whether there's a justiciable racism. And Thomas is like, I want everyone to back up for a second and ask whether the court in Hawaii should have only banned the executive order in Hawaii. And whether it was too much for them to institute a nationwide ban. Like, why couldn't their remedy have been completely useless?
Oh, but I take issue with that characterization. I mean, everybody was sort of grappling with the moment, like, can we be racist as a nation? Is that legal? And okay, we have decided 5-4 that yes, racism is good. And Thomas is like, but we don't go far enough here.
The capper ends up being Thomas, writing by himself. Like, he couldn't even get anyone. Like, that he circulated that concurrence, and even Alito was like, oh, fucking come on. Come on, Clarence. I'm not even going to read this. Like, I'm just going to... You can staple it to the back of the opinion, but I'm not even reading this.
You know what, though? We laugh now. But just like with Alito banging on, some clearly bedrock legal stuff 6 years ago, I'm sure Thomas is going to find a way to figure out to make courts unable to stop racism.
Oh, yeah.
In 10 years. Well, I mean, this is sort of maybe getting ahead of ourselves, but again, this is as good as it's going to get for a long time.
Yeah.
And this is not a very good term at all.
Nope.
And it's just going to get worse.
Nope. But it's sort of a prelude because Kennedy voted with the 5-4, like every time. In 2000, in this term, he did it every time. So this term is literally the preview of what's going to happen, but without even needing to moderate a little to sort of capture Kennedy's weird ass morality.
Yeah, there's not going to be any guessing court. Like a lot of pundits are going to be out of work.
Yeah,
suggesting that maybe there's a close case here. I think it was like Bobby Big Will on Twitter said Roberts is the moderate now.
Right.
And that's absolutely right.
Yep. Everyone is saying that. And Roberts is not going to... Like, Roberts sometimes backs off from the... like I say, I refer to Kennedy as like looking into the abyss and recoiling. And Roberts does it less often. But he does it once in a while. Like, he did it with Obamacare. He did it with Obamacare. Yeah. No, there are a couple of others, though I can't really think of them right now. But
he's not recoiling in the abyss. He just knows that he has to be sensible every once in a while to maintain a legacy.
Right. Well, and he also figures out a way to get a poison pill in every time. I mean, the Obamacare decision, which all the conservatives hate him for, also like imported some really exacting federalist principles and like made the Medicare expansion non-mandatory and did all sorts of things that are helpful in other ways. And so the Obamacare decision is going to end up being cited for all that stuff a lot more than it gets cited for, is Obamacare legal? So he's very good at what he does. So the next case I guess I want to get to is NIFLA versus Becerra, which I think we will probably not spend nearly as much time on. But NIFLA versus Becerra was a case coming out of California where California instituted rules that were basically directed to crisis pregnancy centers, which are nominally healthcare facilities related to pregnancy, but
actually churches.
Yes. but actually are designed just to dissuade anyone who potentially wants an abortion from getting one. Like, I figure if you are a person who didn't intend to get an abortion at any time, then your ultrasound probably is fine. And they give you decent enough advice. But if you even express any interest in getting an abortion, all they're going to do is try to convince you not to get one. And so there were two separate statutes. The first one said that if you do provide medical services, then you have to let them know that the state of California gives low cost and free services up to and including abortion. And for unlicensed facilities, which did not have any medical personnel, they were like, you got to tell them that you don't have any doctors here. Right. And so the court said neither of these were okay.
Well, does anybody? I mean, Mike's in California. Maybe you know this better. I mean, because I couldn't quite understand if we were talking about a subset of pregnancy women's health providers that were run for the purposes of stopping someone who might get an abortion from getting an abortion, but you kind of go to the Jesus van and you know what you're going to get. Right. Or were you showing up at the Jesus van thinking abortion was on the table and you were being tricked, right? Like, yeah, there was a certain sort of factual underpinning that was not apparent from any of what I read that I was missing.
Yeah, I looked back into some of the legislative history behind it, and yes, there were some instances of people that went to a crisis pregnancy center that thought that the name was what it said. They were in crisis and they were pregnant, and that should be the center that helps them. But they weren't actually getting help there. One of the more infamous examples is a lady who showed up that was pregnant, was starting to talk about her options, but she kept getting sent home because they kept telling her that she was sick, and they were just kind of trying to run out the clock more toward the date, toward it being too late for things to happen. So yes, misinformation was a problem, and the purpose of the laws to inform people about rights and services, and specifically around crisis pregnancy centers. And they had a licensing scheme for crisis pregnancy centers for the ones that were more on the up and up, but there were other unlicensed ones that were still out there that try to talk people out of abortion and do all kinds of other activities as well. I mean, so yeah, there was a problem.
I've seen ads for crisis pregnancy centers on the subway, and they're they just speak very generally about they seem like their religious iconography is subtle, and they don't expressly sort of connect themselves to any of that. And they just imply that they're a health center for pregnant women without sort of laying out the things that they won't do, like just sort of giving the impression that they will do what any other health center would do. And so the people who show up only to be told, we don't do that. And you've just showed up at a timeshare meeting. Right, where you can't, you can leave, but you're forced into this conversation, which isn't what you showed up for.
They're also they're also, I think, pretty clearly targeting people for whom English is not their first language. Good point, and that's why the California notice requirement required that the license be put in 13 languages. These are centers that are sort of thriving in the space where someone, when we hear crisis pregnancy center, we think, okay, someone's going to yell at you about abortion. But, someone who doesn't know that as a term of art because English isn't their first language, is going to be much more likely to view that as what they think might be an actual resource.
Yeah. I mean,
That's exactly right.
I didn't love all of the language in it, but I guess to me the problem with Thomas's, and Thomas got to write the majority here, so he didn't go completely off the reservation. But to me, the big problem, and this was the dissent's big problem, is while I thought that the language that California required these crisis pregnancies to say was a bit overbearing, and it is definitely weird to make a quasi-church tell women where they can go, that they can get a cheap or free abortion from the state of California. Right? I'll grant you that that's really bad. The problem is that Planned Parenthood v. Casey and all of the cases like it, the court said it's just fine to require abortion clinics to tell the women coming in about the option of adoption. And if someone providing abortion services has to tell the people coming in, you don't have to do this. The state of Kansas is making me tell you can carry this baby to term and get an adoption. It doesn't make any sense that a person who essentially is in the business of arguing people out of getting abortions the state can't tell them to say, though it's perfectly legal and you can get them here in California, right? It's just picking a side on free speech grounds in a way that is not supportable, especially when Thomas is like, well, abortion is a medical procedure and not abortion is not a medical procedure. and
Casey, which is another Kennedy opinion, upheld, among other things, an informed consent law in Pennsylvania, saying, if that women who are trying to get abortions, were required to have the doctor give them this spiel, and it's been expanded in a lot of states to where the doctor has to now give them these sort of phony warnings, saying like, oh, did you know that abortion can, give you depression and cancer? Yeah. But Kennedy writes a concurrence here that is in a lot of ways even sharper than Thomas's majority opinion. So Kennedy's concurrence, he compares California's licensing scheme to a number of totalitarian regimes.
Yeah.
I'm saying,
I don't know how he gets there, but he says that viewpoint discrimination is inherent in just providing information. That's it's
the same thing as Masterpiece Cake Shop, right? He's like, you're targeting crisis pregnancy centers because they're Christian and not because they sort of trick people who want abortions into showing up. But
we're not targeting Muslims in the other thing.
No, it's like another one, right? He just keeps
where we said we were targeting Muslims. That we're not actually doing it there.
Yep. I mean, he just so two things. One, Casey expressly overruled two cases where they found that the informed consent laws were kind of overbearing, right? So Casey's like, actually, there is some element of informed consent, which is fine, but not both ways. And, oh God, now I lost the other thing that I was going to say. Oh, there are two provisions, right? So even if you think it's a bit much that you force a non-abortion provider on religious grounds, like it may be a bit much to say to them, you have to say where you can go somewhere else for an abortion. I'll even concede that one's not terrible were it not for the unequal treatment under Planned Parenthood v. Casey. The second part of the provision, where the unlicensed facilities were really just basically fraud centers, where they clearly sort of in their advertising imply that they're medical facilities and then there really aren't medical personnel. That part of the law should have been a slam dunk, right? Like the uncovered facilities have to say this facility is not licensed as a medical facility by the state of California and has no licensed medical provider who provides or directly supervises the provision of services. That seems pretty fair. Right?
Yeah.
That seems
that
pretty
was one
fair.
of the purposes of the law.
And then they're just like, also no.
But this gets back to the question I was asking up front, which is, I work in the financial services sector. We sell some consumer financial products. You're not supposed to be defrauding consumers, right? You're supposed to know what you're going in and getting, and if you're allowed to dress your Jesus van up as a full service, medical clinic, and you're not willing to put the full range of services that are available, I mean, they're absolutely scamming people.
Yeah,
and this is putting the Supreme Court stamp of approval on a consumer scam. Leaving aside all of the other sort of
I mean, one of the things that got me was
constitutional issue.
Right. One of the things that got me is Thomas says that California points to nothing, suggesting that pregnant women do not already know that covered facilities are staffed by unlicensed, blah, 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 blah. And that drove me crazy because I'm like, how does California not have findings in the legislative record, right? Like, that's just bonkers to me. And so I don't know what's going on there because there's no indication in the dissent that there were these findings really, which I think is why Tarik was a little sort of confused because there really is not that record, though I'm shocked that there isn't the record. And the only thing that makes me feel a little better about it is that the procedural posture of this case is that it was a review of an injunction. And so it's going to get kicked back to the district court, and hopefully California will actually introduce findings to save the second part of the statute. I don't know if the Supreme Court will acknowledge them when they do, but at least that second part will still have some vitality if they can prove that it is fraud. But I don't even know because they said even if California had presented a non-hypothetical justice, it still burdens speech, which is bonkers. Like, it's just a consumer protection law,
that part of Thomas's finding that was burdensome tracks back to what Adam was saying about having to publish in so many in so many languages. He found that to be burdensome, particularly for unlicensed operators.
Right. I mean, it is.
We got to make it easy and cost effective for them to defraud people better.
Right. I mean, that's just something that, like, he talks about that. Like, the billboard's got to have like 13 languages drowning out the message. And that's just not constitutionally important.
He goes into a word count. He says, look, if you count up all the different languages it has to be in, there are, over 30 words which drown out the 2 words choose life.
Right. Yeah, it's 30 times 13. And
never mind how big the words might be or what typeface or the fact that this notice is probably just like, a white piece of paper with small print slapped on the window.
No. I mean, they say actually that it had to be very detailed, but the response from the dissent on that is a procedural one. They're like, that is a sort of archetypal as applied challenge, right? You can complain that your billboard is impractical because this law is too stupid, but that is not the kind of factual discussion you should be having in a facial challenge to the law on an injunction case. And so, like, all of that should have just been dicta and outside the record, but it wasn't because they didn't want it to be.
So I'm not Adam. I used to be. I used to have hair and principles. And
that's right.
And
Scruples.
like, I'm not an idealist at all, but this was the one that broke me because of the central hypocrisy that after reading the first two and then this one, like the very notion that you can force an abortion provider to scream, please stop, consider some other alternative, and that's fine. And this somehow is not, even though there are significant and legitimate consumer protection angles here as well, to me, exposes all of this as nothing more than a complete exercise in politics and bullshit throwing of words up to just justify result-oriented political results, right? So I thought I was beyond the point in my life and career where I could be stunned by anything, but I am completely shell-shocked by this.
Yeah.
So one of the other themes throughout the cases tonight is that we end up in kind of a worse place than where we started, not just because you're rooting for a particular outcome, but in that it's a mess to comply with all of these. You have to undo all of the union contracts. Now you have every disclosure law is a content-based restriction. If I don't agree with 100% of what the states are making me read there, how does that become workable? You can turn the holding in Becerra into whatever you want it to be for as far as content-based restrictions now. So it's making a mess by weaponizing First Amendment here and pursuing ideological issues,
which is like the key to Kagan's dissent in. The key to Kagan's dissent in Janus was, just like the absolute weaponizing of the First Amendment from Masterpiece Cake Shop to here, to just get policy ends by cramming it into a First Amendment framework. I will say the thing that broke me, that I've never felt closer to being a libertarian than when I saw that the statute that had this law was section 123,471 of the California Code. I was like, are you serious with that number? Section 123,471 of the California Code. That's just the California Health and Safety Code.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm convinced now of every libertarian argument.
It was.
When I got into this, I thought you had to figure out clever ways to kind of push the envelope and make arguments that were tricky and clever and pulled. But this is just completely. We don't have to justify why this is different from that anymore.
No,
yeah,
exactly.
This is different from that because there's 5 of us and 4 of you.
Right.
And again, it's just getting worse.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day, about Kennedy. And, she is a conservative, a friend of mine who's conservative. And she's like, I always was under the impression, because she's not an attorney, I was always under the impression that Kennedy's a liberal. And I said, yeah, you think that because all of your friends have moved so far to the right that Kennedy sort of seems like a liberal because he doesn't vote with you every time. There's a large contingent of conservatives who now think that Roberts is a centrist squish because of his vote in the Obamacare case, but by no standard is he a liberal. It's just they refuse to accept that the alternative outcome in the Obamacare case was the really radical one. There was no basis in law to knock out Obamacare. Exactly. And she was like, well, what about the thing where Obama said it's not a tax, but then the ruling was that the individual mandate was fine because it is a tax. And I said, well, that's because the court doesn't care when you lie to the public. They don't give a shit what you call it. They look.
See Trump v. Hawaii.
Right. Like, no. They're like, it is what it is. It's structured like a tax. If you don't do X, you pay Y. That's a tax. Call it whatever the fuck you want. It remains a tax, and that's within the taxing authority of the federal government, And so it's like there are other instances in which you can oppose it, right? You can be really mad at Obama for lying. George Bush stood up at a debate and he said, read my lips, no new taxes. And then he spent 4 years calling all of his tax increases fees so that he could stand by his pledge. And the Republicans saw through it and they abandoned him. Right? That's what happened here. Obama said it's not a tax, and Roberts was like, oh, shut up, stupid. It's a tax, and that's what's going to save your bacon here, is that we all know that you knew it was a tax all along, and you said so in your briefs. And of course, you were bullshitting on the campaign trail, but campaign trail bullshit is not a constitutional concern.
I wanted to do just a shout out to, I saw that in the travel ban case that when the people that went and actually found what the internal review was of one of the
proclamation,
of the orders, of the proclamation was the Brennan Center, and they're kind of friends of the pod here, and wanted to shout them out for doing.
Oh, that's right.
There.
Yeah, the Brennan Center. Our friend Ames works at the Brennan Center. The Brennan Center's FOIA request turned up the memo in support of the proclamation, supporting the selection of the 7 countries, and found that it was 17 pages long. The exacting review of the entire world to determine 7 countries subject to the executive order was 17 pages. And Roberts got pissy about that too, by the way. He's like, well, the report is 17 pages, but I have to make clear that the data supporting the report is not FOIA-able, and it's probably a lot more. And so he just dismissed the fact that this half-assed read the book yesterday book report in support of a sweeping change in federal immigration policy was on the back of a napkin. He's like, there's more than a napkin.
I'm sure somewhere. Yeah.
Roberts was also very, very impressed with the administration taking Chad off of the list. Right. That really meant a lot to him.
Yep. Chad came into compliance, and so he took Chad off, and that proves that they're very
Chad and the Virgin.
Yeah. I mean, and so
it was the first time this administration has ever opposed anyone named Chad.
I think I'm gonna show my relative age on this panel here, but with regard to Kennedy, one thing that I think he's gonna leave with me is, for exactly 3 years, it was very fashionable to include in your wedding vows or in your wedding program a selection from Oberfell.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think that's quite as fashionable anymore.
Right. For my generation, that would be your second wedding. But yeah, I don't think people are going to want to have Justice Kennedy's name at the bottom of their thing. Is that?
I'm going to show my age and just say also, and since the average age of this podcast is about 80, I think I'll be in good company. Like, I was like 10 years old when Reagan came marching in, and he was like a complete idiot who was going to lead us into nuclear war, and that seemed really bad. And I lived through 9/11 and George Bush and the expansion of the security state, and that was fucking awful. This one seems just as bad or worse than the rest of them. I don't know. It's very hard for me to find any youthful exuberance or hope for the future. So I'm hoping that my cynicism is misplaced, but I'm strapping in for some fun times.
Yeah, needless to say, I've invested heavily in gold and survival seeds.
I'm in my bedroom surrounded by some of my best smothering pillows.
Crime, we hang side by side at the swinging party down the line. On the prairie pavement, losing propositions, quitting school and going to work and never going fishing.
All right, we ready
Great
to
ship of state.
we ready to move on to the last thing?
Are we ready to move on to the last part?
So for our last thing, we are going to go from the Supreme Court of the United States, which is the highest court in the land, the apex of jurisprudence, to Canada, which is pretend. It is entirely pretend, and none of it really exists.
That's like Midwest, but worse.
Yep. And so this,
I hate Canada.
and so we're going to be talking about the lawsuits by Lindsay Shepherd and Jordan Peterson against Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario. And they're embarrassing and dumb. And I just want to point out that I still haven't read the Jordan Peterson complaint because Canada doesn't have digital filing. Like they don't.
No. Charles, Ontario.
Oh, Ontario.
The province of Ontario.
The province of it. I can't blame the whole country. The province of Ontario.
I'm sure none of it has an incredible pacer-like system where you can pull anything.
Yeah, but so we couldn't. So I was able to get Lindsay Shepherd's complaint because someone put it up on Scribed. I was not able to find the Jordan Peterson one, but he did us the favor of literally reading it to us in a video.
Including all the prefatory clauses.
Ontario Superior Court of Justice between Lindsay Shepherd, that's the plaintiff, who's a student at the school, and Nathan Rambucana, I think is how it's pronounced, Ardria Joel, Herbert Himlott, and Wilfrid Laurier University, the defendants. This is a statement of claim. To the defendant, a legal proceeding has been commenced against you by the plaintiff. The claim is okay. I'm not gonna, but that's sort of what his video is like, just reading like everything in the complaint.
Wait, because that's material. Like that is material to me. It's like this guy has been hailed as one of the most significant public intellectuals to come down the pike in quite some time by august publications and ostensibly intelligent people. And he is so stupid that when getting online and posting a video about his, impactful, significant lawsuit against Wilfrid Laurier and the SJWs ensconced there, spends 10 minutes reading verbatim the prefatory jurisdictional clauses that establish that he's a natural person who resides in Waterloo, Ontario.
And
you can't just skip over that part.
And upon seeing his name in the case caption, cannot resist saying, "That's me."
That's me.
And I got to tell you what it reminded me of more than anything. And let me say, I did stand up for a while, and one of my first jokes ever was about my mom calling for computer help. And whenever she would do that, when she would describe what was on screen, she would basically start by reading the banner ads at the top of the page. and thinking back to my mom asking if she should punch the monkey, that's Jordan Peterson reading his complaint in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice.
My address is.
So wait, does someone want to give the facts on this case?
I'll try, but can somebody help me?
Yeah.
But before we do this, I just want to point out that the mascot of Wilfrid Laurier University is a golden hawk.
We are all
the golden hawk, the most noble of all hawks.
Yeah.
Famed for its eyesight and long view on matters, unlike Wilfrid Laurier itself. Actually, again, with all good stupid cases, there's a germ of actual shit here that was probably not the best thing to do.
Yes.
Right? Lindsay Shepard, who I think we've all agreed in the Slack is a snack.
No. Off the record.
I'll edit this out. Don't worry. I'm not gonna.
I don't think I agree to that.
Was a student lecturer, a grad student lecturer.
She was a master's student and a TA.
A master's student and a lecturer at TA at Wilfrid Laurier. And I believe in SJW. I think she.
I don't buy that.
I don't believe that for one minute.
We'll get to that in a minute, but yes, she asserts that she was.
Her political viewpoint, I don't think she showed some video clips to a class. And among those video clips was a clip of Jordan Peterson in an effort to start a conversation about trans issues, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, well,
it was a communications class, and the debate was the debate about C16, which is the Canadian law.
No, it wasn't even there yet, though. It was just a class about grammar. Right? She was just talking about grammar, and she showed Jordan Peterson debating someone on some Canadian talk show where they talked about there was some law or ruling about using a trans person's preferred pronoun.
This is how Jordan Peterson burst on the scene.
Right. And so it was she
objecting to this law.
Right. So she just showed a clip of this TV debate to the class in the context of exploring the history of pronoun usage in various languages, which seems like an insanely appropriate thing to do.
Right.
That's what's
and
so...
let me just say, nobody's as online as I am, but I'm assuming in this clip, Jordan Peterson was actually dressed like a 70s pimp. Like he had a hat with a big feather and like 17 lapels on his jacket. This guy has the worst suits, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but it seems like not exactly. I don't know that I'd have chosen it because the debate was probably really stupid, because every time Jordan Peterson speaks, it's vaguely stupid. But at least superficially, it's on point, right? If you want to talk about the history of the evolution of pronouns, and two people are on TV talking about whether contemporary use fits into that, I don't know. It seems to fit within the broad range of academic freedom that a grad student can show to her class. But I guess it got back to her advisor, who went completely apeshit on her. And so the advisor and a department head and the person from the diversity committee invited her into a meeting and screamed at her for over an hour that she was a transphobe and had violated various Canadian human rights laws by showing the clip.
It was akin to showing clips of Hitler.
Because Jordan Peterson is basically an alt-right Hitler. And so she's suing for emotional distress and for all kinds of violations of Canadian human rights. It's a little unclear. They don't write out the statutory claims the way we do in like American complaints.
In good American courts.
Like we write like normal
Canadian
people, and the
courts.
Canadians just like write, and then they just expect you to figure out what they're talking about from context. But it's unclear like what claims they're making, because that's not how you write a complaint.
It's actually, they put it in the front. It's harassment, intentional infliction of nervous shock,
Yes.
Negligence, constructive dismissal, and then a whole bunch of money because you were assholes.
Right, but then they don't really outline what the statutory requirements for any of those things are.
No, not at all.
So they don't make the legal claims. They just say, this is what I'm suing for, and this is the background to it. What say you, Wilfrid Laurier?
But one thing that Lindsay Shepherd did when she was called into the meeting is she recorded it.
She recorded the whole thing, which, by the way...
Oh, she didn't just do that.
And
what else
then-
did she do?
She then posted it on YouTube.
Yeah. But
So this is one of the things that's sort of baffling to me, at least, with the American interpretation of libel law. Putting aside the First Amendment differences, one of the key elements of anything slanderous or libelous or of defamation generally is that a third party hear it, and that the fact that third party hears this causes some reputational damage.
It's a publication requirement.
Right. So it's the publication of it. But in this case, it's Shepherd herself who is publishing
His co-plaintiff.
Yeah.
I would be adding her as a defendant if I were Wilfrid Laurier University.
Well, but this gets into like one of the things to me that is insane, right? Shepherd's lawyer is Peterson's lawyer.
right.
And Shepherd, in fact, if you were interested in vindicating Peterson's rights, is the publisher of this stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. Again,
He's
it's Canada. It's a crude and unsophisticated country, as we all know. They might not have rules like we do about
We tried to
conflicts of interest.
We tried to have a Canadian on the podcast to defend them, but he
didn't show
declined. He
Yeah,
declined.
Doug Exeter, you're getting everything you deserve right now. It would seem to me that a sophisticated country would have a rule that you really can't represent both of these people because you're failing to point to your gun
Yeah.
on behalf of Peterson.
I mean, yeah.
A critically important
I
defendant.
mean, look, Wilfrid, if Canada has rules and they allow impleader, Wilfrid Laurier would clearly implead Lindsay Shepherd as a defendant for publishing the statements. And if they did so, it would create an irreconcilable conflict for Jordan Peterson's attorney because now his attorney is defending a different defendant. And so, I mean, one of the things, this came up earlier, is that Lindsay Shepherd says that they yelled at her in this meeting, even though Shepherd had chosen no side and up to that point disagreed with what she understood to be Peterson's perspective. And that is clearly a lie. She may not have felt particularly strongly either way, but when she brought the recording to this meeting, she clearly knew exactly what she was doing, and it certainly shouldn't have changed her opinion on the use of trans pronouns either way.
Well, but Angela Nagel has already established conclusively that when you criticize someone for doing something, that's not SJWE, you make them into an alt-right weirdo. And here we have conclusive proof of the Nagel theorem. Lindsay Shepherd was an SJW the day she showed this clip, and now she is a Pepe.
So, like Charles said before, we don't have the statement of Jordan Peterson's statement of claim, but online there were some people that had either heard him or had seen it. And the way that he deals with this in his claim that I think that we're going to get into more later is that he says it's foreseeable for the Wilfrid Laurier folks to know if they talk to their TA in a meeting about Jordan Peterson and they say things about him that could injure him, that it would get out of that meeting somehow. So they kind of say it would be inevitable that it would get out.
Yeah, so sort of fast forwarding, so Shepherd files her claim against Wilfrid Laurier. Then Shepherd goes on a little bit of a speaking tour, speaking to, the rational, skeptical Peterson, not quite alt-right, but actually alt-right community.
The racism community.
Yeah, the racism community, the organized racism community. And some months later, Peterson decides that, since this YouTube video, this recording that Lindsay Shepherd has taken has 500,000 views, Peterson has a claim against Wilfrid Laurier for the things said in the meeting about him. So he sues, and his complaint is mirrors almost exactly Shepherd's complaint. It just, finds and replaces some parties, and he even has the same attorney, so he keeps the signature block the same.
Except that Lindsay Shepherd has a claim, right?
Yeah.
No, they were dicks to Lindsay Shepherd.
The thing about Lindsay Shepherd is they screamed at her in this meeting, accused her of breaking the law. They took away her, one of the things that the claim does over and over is it says that Nathan Rambukkana was a really shitty advisor. He barely ever met with me. He never reviewed my notes or my syllabus. And then after this meeting, he said that he had to review every class thing in advance, and he wouldn't let me show any more videos. And after the semester was over, they assigned me to a professor who had gone on the record saying that I was a horrible person who was trying to damage the university, and they made me work for her. Rambukkana told everyone that the meeting was in response to a student complaint, but then later the university admitted that no one had ever actually complained. And so it was all gratuitous. Rambukkana basically made up a complaint just so he could yell at his TA about being a transphobe and Peterson supporter. The university president responded badly. It took them forever to admit that everything they did was wrong and apologize.
Which it was,
and which they did very late. And then they just, there's a student at the school who she refers to as Ethan Jackson, a transgender activist, and who she certainly portrays in her complaint as a litigious loon, filed a complaint against her on what seems very flimsy grounds, and they put her through the ringer on his complaint, even though they had really done nothing at all to follow up on her complaint against the professors and the diversity committee person who had tortured her for the better part of a semester. So I don't know enough to know how any of this fits into Canadian law, but this isn't going in the Wilfrid Laurier brochure.
Well, but yeah, again, look, I we talk about this a fair amount. I sort of believe that most of your Anglosphere jurisdictions' legal system is built around who's the asshole here. Wilfrid Laurier is the asshole with respect to Lindsay Shepherd, and an asshole in Jordan Peterson is going to be able to ride in and cash in all of it.
No, I don't think so, though. I don't think
Well,
Jordan.
I don't think he's gonna win.
Oh, you mean
but
outside of the context of
no,
the suit?
but he just gets to put on a stupid suit and go around and talk about how the academy is lined up against him, which it should be, right? Because he is a person, number one, who has written 2 works of any substance in his 20, 30-year career. One of which is a diagram of how women are like dragons. And the other one is a thing that says clean your room, right? he's a Jungian archetypist, the most discredited sort of psychologist you could be. He's a complete quack and weirdo. And, he should be discriminated against in an academic context, even if he wasn't also the author of an idea to build a database in which you put any professor who posits any arguably Marxist ideas in the database in order to drive them out of the academy.
Right.
Like, this is not a champion of free speech. This is not a serious intellectual by any metric. And once again, by shrieking at some weird grad student, you've given this guy a significant amount of oxygen, up to and including this discussion right here.
Right.
So when he's asked about the contradiction of being a free speech advocate and then suing for defamation, he kind of hamstring, or he cuts himself off at the knees and says that, and kind of admits that this case isn't very solid. He says that he believes that he has a strategy of combining these 2 cases together to teach a lesson to people who would say things that he believes are not true about him. I'd like to argue with him about quite a few of those allegations because they seem true to me about him. But yeah, so he's already.
Among other things, they said this is not a serious academic. I mean, that's the ultimate charge to level against this guy. If you have read his initial book, it is gibberish. Yeah. It is warmed over Joseph Campbell Jungian archetype with drawings of literal dragons all over.
Yeah, and I mean, but it's funny to get to what he actually and we know Shepard recorded it, so every mean thing that they said about him is in there, and a lot of it is classic opinion, and in a state with normal First Amendment law like ours, would be dismissed. But there were a couple of things in there which, if they weren't true, seem more serious. Like they said, now I'm forgetting because it was recorded and it's not written in front of me, but they made a couple of things which sounded like factual claims. That he tried to get certain people fired.
He's targeted trans people.
He's targeted trans people. He has tried to get certain people fired. He is, they made affirmative claims about his behavior as opposed to his personality, which, were it not for the fact that it took place in a private conversation and wasn't sort of for public consumption, if they said those things in a way other than in a heated disciplinary meeting with one person, recording the whole thing, those may actually be the basis for some kind of claim. But almost all of it was, they said I was stupid, and I'm not dumb like they say. I'm smart.
Yeah. Right. Peterson takes a lot of umbrage at the invocation of Hitler.
Yeah.
He reading his complaint says, he goes through, he says, fact, Adolf Hitler was one of the greatest despots of the 20th century. I am a professor. But it's not the Hitler comparison that might get Wilfrid Laurier in trouble, right? No one actually thinks that this is a factual statement that Jordan Peterson is, going to assume the head of the German state in the 1930s. What I think might get them in a little bit of trouble is that there are things that it seems that they said that were claims about Peterson that were actually things that Milo Yiannopoulos did.
Right.
I think there were a couple instances where they had said that they'd claimed that Peterson had put up information, like doxing information about people, which is something that I think is actually a claim about Yiannopoulos, and then they would later go on to compare Peterson to Yiannopoulos. So that sort of potential mixing up of their sort of methods of operation might be what would get them in more trouble, again, if it were not in an executive session of a disciplinary meeting.
Right. Oh, but they were a bunch of snooty academics that were parachuting in to shriek at some TA and just figured they'd pile on as much nonsense as they could, and not thinking that this woman was wearing like a giant mic and a flower on her lapel, right? Say that again, into the flower. And you just hand this guy, again, like some grist for his mill of persecution, when in fact, if you trace his literal career back, one of his most concrete proposals is a database for maybe Marxist professors where we out them and expose them.
Yep. It's not great. He's the
literal worst, and he's also Canadian, which makes him doubly the worst.
So it's also that it's weird when the border gets crossed to when tactics that were heretofore an alt-right person or alt-right adjacent person would be like, oh, the plaintiff's bar, defamation suits, trying to go after people in this way is the most beta thing that you can do. And but when it's done because of the right reasons, it's transmuted to alpha.
Well, and again, it's laying bare the notion that I think all of what we've talked about is teaching us that this isn't a battle of ideas as much as Dave Rubin or anybody else wants to call it that. This is an actual battle. We're just here to fight out who's going to win. The shitheads are us, and the shitheads are doing pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, one of the funniest things is that every time Jordan Peterson tries to act like an alpha, he's undermined by, first of all, his voice, and second of all, by the fact that he just gets things like hilariously wrong. I mean, the book review, like one of the part of his book review, like the person just makes fun of his book and his kind of, he always talks about his, indigenous friend, and he I was inducted into the tribe, and we're very close, and it's super meaningful. And the person reviewing the book basically says that the whole thing is incredibly patronizing in a bunch of different ways, and says that he is, quote, romancing the noble savage. And genius PhD Russell Peters is a comedian. Jordan Peterson.
I'll edit it out.
Jordan Peterson jumps in. Genius Jordan Peterson jumps in and he goes, "Are you accusing me of fucking my friend? Because that's horrible. You first of all, don't call him a savage. Second of all, it is not a romantic relationship." And everyone read that and was like, wait a second. No.
You don't actually know what noble savage?
Yeah, right. No. I'm not calling him a noble savage. I am saying you are depicting him, Mr. Archetype, as the archetype of the noble savage in your condescending, patronizing book. And romancing is not romancing, but it's kind of like, am I crazy? Right. It's a Britishism for romanticizing. We
had that movie Romancing the Stone. I never thought it was about somebody trying to have sex with an emerald or anything. Come on,
Did you see the movie? You're wrong.
So he completely blows. And then I want, if he were here, I would slap him in the face. I would slap him happily.
So if he were here in my room,
Speaking of romancing,
I am 5'10" and 114 pounds, and I would slap him happily.
That video that we saw where he's describing how he met and eventually married his wife was
Oh my god! Oh my god!
It scared me. I'm still frightened.
Yeah, well, describe it, Mike. No one else has seen it. We're not talking among friends. This is a podcast.
So the story goes that she was a year
13.
They were teens.
and she was a year older than him, and he was resentful of that from the get-go. Like there's a lot of resentment going through this, you could just tell. So she is a year older, but they're in the same grade because he's so smart and he got moved up a grade. And then they're at he takes over her paper route. And so they're in the same neighborhood, and he kind of fancies her. He takes over her paper route, and he goes to great pains to point out how he was so much more successful than she was in the paper route, which is kind of weird. So while he's over at her house delivering papers, there are other people there, and they're having a conversation, and the prospect of marriage comes up, and the girl makes a joke about how she's going to marry Jordan Peterson one day, or maybe it's her friend that makes the joke.
Well, no. She says she would never take her husband's name.
You're right.
She would never take her husband's name. Though,
take it away, Charles.
So I suppose I'm going to have to find someone who's kind of a wimp.
A wimp. I'm going to marry a wimp.
I'm going to marry a wimp, so I won't have to take his name. And then kind of looks at Jordan Peterson and waggles her eyes or whatever to be like, you seem like that kind of a pushover. And so that is our future. And then I guess like however many years later as adults, they meet and start dating. And one of his conditions of marriage, because he's been seething, he's been carrying this fucking burden for over a decade, is he's like, well, only if you take my name. And presumably she did and regrets it.
Yeah.
It's a natural hierarchy of things. It's all hierarchy.
He imposed order on her chaos by making her a Peterson.
Man, if you do any wrong to him, he's out there. He's going to get you.
Yep.
He's not going to stop until he does.
As an Arab, I respect that.
Revenge is a dish best served by making her live with you forever.
Revenge is a dish best served with a marriage certificate.
Revenge is a dish best served as a sandwich you just asked your wife to make you.
Revenge is a dish best served with lobster, the most noble of all creatures.
Their nervous systems run on serotonin, just as ours do.
They have a clotting agent very similar to the clotting agent of humans. They are one of the few non-mammal creatures with a blood clotting system. I don't know if he's ever said that. I just know it to be true. All right.
I bought it.
I'm impressed with the lobster knowledge. That's pretty good. Man.
So, anything else? Any final dunks?
No, we have to.
Yeah, we got to cut it off. All right.
Horrible.
This is. We are now at hour 14. So I'd like to thank everyone who joined me tonight, Tarik and Mike and Adam. I am your host, Charles Starr. Good night, everybody.
Night, folks.
Lick it shut.
We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run.
We wanna thank you for flying with us. We know you could've stayed home, just cried and cussed me. Or your guns go off if it's time to bust me. Or they tanks have time to rust. They got the armies turning bullets into gold. They got the hookers turning tricks into cold. And every time the police kicks in the dough, an angel gas breaks dips in the O. And even if a D-boy flips in my O, it ain't enough to buy shit anymore. Sleep in the doorway, piss on the floor. Look in the sky, wait for missiles to show. It's finna blow, cause they got the TV, we got the truth. They own the judges and we got the proof. We got hella people, they got helicopters. They got the bombs and we got the guillotine.
We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. We got the guillotine. We got the guillotine, you better run. Talk about it, not show. Be about it, spot it, know. Talk about it, not show. Be about it, spot it, know.
I just spit the dope lines, I don't snort them. Tell the boss to call police to escort them. You don't ride out them lies, you just quote them. Get offline, plug into this modem. No, you can't outvote them, the rules are still golden. Only jewels we holdin' if we guardin' our scrotum. If you press the ear to the turf that is stolen, you can hear the sound of limitations exploding. Please, sir, may we have another portion? We're children of the beast that dodge the abortion. Neck placed firm between the floor and the portion. When shut your shit down, don't call it extortion. Caution, we're coming for your head. So call the feds and get files and shred. Every textbook read said bring you the bread, but guess what? We got you instead.
We got the guillotine.